Hi again. So I'm still talking about the five spiritual faculties. So just to recap, the first two that form a pair were faith and wisdom. And now we're on the second pair. So the first one of those was energy, and I've done a couple of talks on energy or virya. And yesterday, or the day before, I was talking about meditation. And when we talk about meditation in this context, we're talking about meditation proper, you could say. Sometimes it's called one-pointed concentration. So why I say proper is because sometimes I think we can just sort of slump on our cushion and not be doing very much at all, not really putting in the energy that it needs. So yes, I thought I'd say a bit more about meditation in quite a down-to-earth way. So yesterday I did refer to the higher states of consciousness, to these four dhyanas that the Buddha described in the scriptures and that Sangharakshita has described also. And I said you could look those up because they weren't ones that particularly resonated with me or I found particularly helpful. Anyway, I will just say one of them, just to give you a flavour, as it were. I think it's partly because it's not in our culture or time. So the first level of dhyana, the first dhyana, was described as being like having a lot of soap powder and absorbing that powder into water. And so, by collating the powder, by working it, as it were, with water, it becomes eventually like a lovely ball of soap. It becomes something cohesive. And so the way that relates to meditation is we're bringing all our energies together. We settle into our meditation posture. We bring attention to our body and to all our senses. We're aware of all of that. We're not trying to cut anything out in our experience. And then we bring all that together. And when it comes together, we can feel quite one-pointed. One-pointedness is an interesting term, really, because you can experience as being suddenly almost like you're a grain of sand or you're a pinprick. Everything has become so intense. There's no other word for it. Intense and one-pointed. Very singular, that you feel almost like you're very tiny. But it can be the opposite. You can feel like you're enormous and you encompass the whole world. But it's an integrated sort of feeling, a very integrated sort of feeling. And that isn't hard to achieve. I think it requires balanced effort, not being too forced, but not being too floppy. I usually try and avoid the word when I'm leading a meditation, at the beginning, like settle into your posture, because the word settle sort of suggests to me settling down in a nest. And that's when we fall asleep or we just get a bit comfortable and get a bit vague. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want to become vague. We want to be alive and awake. Sometimes it's said that we should meditate as if our turban was on fire. Okay, we don't wear turbans, but, imagine if your hair was on fire. Or as if you're meditating with a snake in your lap. In other words, you would be very alert and aware for any change of sensation or change in movement. So when we meditate, it's really good if we can try and let the body become still and quiet. Still and quiet. Just allow everything to relax and settle while being alert and awake. Now, many people think that when you meditate, you should aim not to have any thoughts. And that is really a ridiculous aim. Because the mind, we've trained our minds very thoroughly to think all the time. And of course, in meditation, we can learn to quiet those thoughts, but we can't do it forcibly. We need to do it very gradually. And that is, well, I'll give you a few tips about calming the mind so it's not going to be so concerned with thoughts. The first that I talk a lot about is being embodied. So if you can focus on the felt sensations within the body, that does take you away from the thinking mind. Assuming that you learn to do one thing at once, it's like if you really put your awareness into a sensation, really into a sensation fully, then that becomes the center of your experience, and there's not room left to have thoughts wandering all over the place. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is to have the attitude of sky-like mind, which means that you look for a sense of spaciousness inside you, unlimited spaciousness. And as thoughts pop up, you see them a bit like clouds passing through the sky. You just don't get caught up with them. And that's the main thing. Thoughts will arise. We don't have to get caught up with them. We don't have to follow them. We make a choice to do that. I mean, initially you're going to find that, we'll just run away with all sorts of stories and plans and so on. But when we become convinced that we want to meditate, when we become really clear about that, then we will look to notice, there it is again. There it is again. It pops up all over the place, but we don't follow the stories. So we get caught up in an awful lot of concepts and ideas. And that's what we are trying to avoid, is getting caught up. So I sometimes use the analogy, imagine you're a host of a party, and the doorbell rings, and you go to the door, and there's somebody new there. Maybe you know them a little bit. You invite them in. You shake their hand, or actually nowadays you probably just give them a hug or a kiss if you're allowed to, once COVID is ended. So you greet them, and you greet them warmly. But actually you don't stay with them, because there's all these other people. There's other people coming down the road that are going to ring the doorbell. So you just allow them to go, and you pass them on to other people to talk to. In a way, it's a bit similar with thinking. Instead of getting caught up, I mean, we don't kick it out, like we don't do to the guests. We don't say, sorry, no room, and kick them out. And we don't do that to thoughts either. We don't say, I'm not acknowledging you. I've been told not to, and I'm not. No. We know what's in our mind. We see it arise. And then, okay, there it is. And there it goes. It'll go if we don't give it attention. It'll leave. It'll pass on. Other people can entertain it. Other parts of ourselves can entertain it, if you like. So the main thing to remember is just not to get carried away by the thoughts. They will arise. It doesn't matter, We just keep letting them go. But what's interesting is if we really keep doing that, eventually they think it's a bit like training a dog, You ignore its bad behaviour and you reinforce its positive. And we can look for what's positive in our experience. But when thoughts are arising, it's just like, okay, we're not going to be bothered by them. We're not going to be bothered. We allow them to go. We allow them to dissipate. And that's the main thing to remember. Because once we do that again and again and again and again, and it does take a lot to do that, eventually they sort of give up a bit. It's a bit like that spaciousness, that spacious sky becomes more enjoyable, because that spaciousness is what we're all looking for. We're looking for a state of relaxation and openness, where we don't have to
worry about what we're going to do later. We don't have to solve all the problems we've got. We don't have to bring the to-do list with us. We can put it down for the time that we're meditating. So it's like, be curious. What's here? What's in our mind when we're not bothering it with all those stories and so on? That's probably enough for today. Bye for now.